I hope we now have some strong leadership on why drugs are wrong.
A joint.
A joint.
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Oh, gnarly. What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule 1 drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
Oh, thank you so much. Welcome back, everybody, and my apologies for not ending that rant as professionally as I would like. It went longer than I expected. I thought I could just delay the close of the show and then kick in the closing theme, and that didn't work. So, my apologies. But if you want to read that entire rant, it's available on hightimes.com. I just posted the link in the chat room. But yeah, this Stam guy, I know I went on this in great detail yesterday and played some of his clips. But I think if you watch that whole speech, that whole lecture, and you really try to take a meta-analysis of it, don't get into the weeds of him saying 14% or 9% of this or 10% or 16% of that and crunch the numbers and is the numbers right? Are the numbers right? You can get lost in the weeds on that stuff and miss the big picture. And the big picture is that this guy sees us as vermin. He sees drug users as vermin that need to be eradicated, that need to be stigmatized. He sees that recreational drug use needs to be forbidden and naughty and awful and something that is frowned upon by society. Because you know how much society loves drug users. These guys, they really think that people like, the people in Drug Policy Alliance and other organizations that are trying to, provide safe injection facilities and heroin-assisted maintenance and all of these proven activities that help people in need. Clean needle exchanges and so forth. They see that as encouraging drug use. They think that's it. We actually have guys in Ohio now, after I told this story last week, where they are suggesting that you have a 3 strikes and you're dead policy for opioid overdose. We'll send someone out with the Suboxone, with the Narcan, the naloxone. We'll send someone out with the opioid overdose treatment twice. But if you call a third time, we're just going to let you die of the overdose. Because these people think it's a moral failing. They think it is a moral choice you're making. All you got to do is just not do drugs. Just say no, like Nancy Reagan said. Just say no. They have such an obscene understanding or misunderstanding of what's going on here. They think that clean needle exchanges and heroin-assisted maintenance and naloxone treatments for people who overdose encourage people to use drugs. They think that people out there are making rational decisions when it comes to this. That someone who's got a heroin addiction, who's got an opioid addiction, who's coming down, who's got the severe cravings, the withdrawal symptoms, feeling sicker than you can possibly imagine, that person's making rational decisions with regard to their drug input. Like, imagine if someone in, let's say, desert Arizona or the outback of Australia or, someplace like that, posted that they had a new snake bite anti-venom policy. If you get bitten by a snake twice, we'll give you the anti-venom, but the third time, that's on you, man. You should know better than to be running around where there's snakes out. You knew that if you went around where the snakes were, you were going to get bit again. Why should we spend all our taxpayer money trying to save your life when you are just recklessly and selfishly walking around in the desert where there's snakes? That's the same attitude. That's the same attitude, folks. That's the same attitude as this guy's attitude toward people struggling with opiate addictions. And the desperation with which these guys are trying to tie marijuana to the opiate crisis is stunning. Oh, now you want to play. Okay. All right, let's go. Let's kill that. It's just stunning to me, though. These guys think that dealing with drugs and drug issues can be handled through punishment. Well, I was going to shoot some heroin today, but I just heard that they might not send out someone with naloxone for me if I overdose. So, well, that's convinced me. That's convinced me I'm just going to stop doing heroin. They really think that's how this works, right? And again, his point about we need to stigmatize recreational drug users. It's become too acceptable to be a recreational drug user. We need to stigmatize it. Well, you used to stigmatize it like crazy. It's until like 2012, marijuana use has been fairly well stigmatized. You lose your job over it. You can't go look for other jobs if you're using it. They can take your kids away for it. They can piss test you for it. They can take away your car if they find a little bit of it in your car through asset forfeiture. If they convict you of cultivating it, they can put you in prison. They can take your stuff. They can put you on probation. They can require you to, again, show up for more piss tests. But that's not convincing us to stop smoking pot because Snoop Dogg is popular. That's what they really think. He had a point. He had a whole set of paragraphs in there where he talked about pop culture and how pop culture was becoming so accepting of drug use and so promoting of drug use, blah, 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 blah. So he thinks going back and doing more of what we've been doing for the past 40 years without success is somehow going to find success in the next 40 years or so. And for this guy to be trying to evoke the specter of the opiate overdose crisis and in the same breath be condemning the medical use of cannabis is entirely opposite of the direction we should be going. It's like, how many more studies we need to have that show marijuana is an effective treatment for neuropathic pain, effective treatment for chronic pain, effective treatment as a complement to opioids. I mean, sometimes we get on this subject of opioids, and I fear that some of the listeners might be like, yeah, opiates are bad, they're evil. No, drugs aren't evil. Drugs aren't good. Drugs are things, and your relationship with them can be good or bad. But drugs in and of themselves are things, they're tools. And there are some people who need that tool. There are some people with extreme cancer pain, extreme neuropathic pain, people that need a fentanyl patch. They need a constant time-release dose of highly powerful opioid painkiller. So this is, none of these rants are to say, well, get rid of the opioids. No, keep the opioids. But give people the choice, the option of cannabis as well. And so many of those people who need the opioids find they need fewer of them, less of it, if they're using cannabis as well. There's a synergistic effect. The cannabis makes the opioids work better. The opioids make the cannabis work better. Everything's working in concert here. And this isn't just speculation. We've got the surveys from Berkeley Patients Group. We got the surveys from various studies that have been on this particular subject, where patients say, 2/3 of them say, yeah, I'm switching out my pain pills for pot. Or since I've started pot, I've been able to kick down like half of my pain pills or get rid of them altogether. So for the DEA, for this Jeff Stam, for these guys to so desperately try to smear marijuana as the gateway to heroin, when what it is appearing to everyone who objectively observes it is the gateway out of heroin addiction. It's the gateway out of the opiate crisis. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this as well, because the opiates have become a huge issue in drug policy. But I got some other stories I want to cover as well. So stay tuned. We got some other stuff to talk about, including a new report from Drug Policy Alliance, they had two reports they announced today. The one was the New York arrest disparity one, but this other one is about decriminalizing drug use and possession. All drug use and possession. Well, Project Sam's got a problem with that, so we'll take a look at what Project Sam had to say. Also, Nevada running out of weed in its first week is fairly par for the course. We're going to take a look at a Newsweek story that talks about how all the other states have faced marijuana shortages. Plus, karma is a bitch for incest. Coming up.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
Did you know that each day in the state of Georgia, more than 6 people are diagnosed with HIV? As a person providing life-saving services to those most at risk, I know HIV is preventable. We need more people in this fight, which is why I want you to join me this October in Atlanta for the 2017 Drug Policy Alliance Reform Conference. Join us in the fight to end the drug war. Register now at reformconference.org.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the UK Cannabis Chronicle from the UK Cannabis Social Clubs. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, you know, because they've got a town called Argosville. Arr. What are you smoking there, boy?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Delta 9 House and Studios. Beautiful Mount Hood in the background there. So, are you feeling crampy? Are you feeling any stomach pains? Some sharp stomach pains? Perhaps feeling a little nausea? Perhaps vomiting and diarrhea with blood? What could these be symptoms of? Well, this week, it's a symptom of an overdose of iron. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. An overdose of irony. Irony, not iron. I'm sorry. WebMD, you're completely wrong. You don't have anything for irony. But I tell you, folks, I have more than gotten my USDA recommended daily requirement of irony this week. Or is it schadenfreude? I'm not sure if what I'm talking about next is irony, schadenfreude, or just karma is a bitch. It's one of the three, or maybe a combination thereof. I'm sure the Germans have a real long word for the combination of all three of those. But it comes by way of two stories. One of them with a direct link to what's going on here in weed world. But let me start with the overall political story, and that would be this Donald Trump Jr. thing. Oh, I don't know if you're following this, man. But he released today the email trail that led to him taking the meeting with the Kremlin lawyer at Trump Tower last summer to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. And basically the email trail, and I don't know why he released the damn thing. Well, he said that the New York Times would be releasing it, so he released it himself. But I'm not even like a lawyer. I've never been to law school. I think I could successfully prosecute the case of collusion and treason on Donald Trump Jr. with this evidence. He says, I'd love it in response to getting dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russian government that would help them win the election. So my irony level was already peaked at the idea that after A whole summer of chants of lock her up. She used email. She used an unsecured email server, Hillary Clinton in her email. After that entire debacle, to think that it would be an email that takes down Trump. It just makes me giddy. Just makes me giddy with irony. It's just a beautiful thing. So my irony level was already peaked. I was already like, that's as much irony. Oh, that's all the irony I need for the week. And then I went through today's news. And I got this story from the New York Daily News. And it's like literally Shakespearean in its irony. This is like an O. Henry play. I cut my hair to get you the watch fob. I sold my watch so you could have the brush, right? It's definitely at the O. Henry level of irony here, or tragedy, schadenfreude. Again, I'm not exactly sure how to characterize it, but it's a story we get out of Reuters. And it involves a guy named Jeffrey Perlman. Now, Perlman was a district sales manager for Insys Therapeutics. Now, does that name sound familiar? Insys Therapeutics is the Arizona-based maker of a fentanyl spray called Subsys. And remember, fentanyl, the opioid that's 50 times more powerful than morphine, right? So Insys makes Subsys, this opioid spray. Insys, you'll also remember, was the big pharma company in 2016 that donated $500,000 against Arizona legalization. And you may also remember Insys is the company that, following the election and following Donald Trump and his FDA appointments, got a sweetheart deal for their new cannabis medicine, their synthetic cannabis medicine they're putting together. They got a special Schedule 2 sweetheart deal on that. So you remember Insys Therapeutics, right? It's clear in your mind. Hates weed, donated money to fight it, makes a synthetic opiate. Okay, so we set the table, right? So this Jeffrey Perlman, he was a former district sales manager, and he's one of several former employees and executives from Insys that are facing charges over that Subsys, that opiate under the tongue fentanyl spray, right? Now, the case against Insys has to do with these executives and managers, including this guy, participating in schemes to bribe doctors to prescribe more of this opioid painkiller. Basically, what Perlman did, according to the prosecutors, they're alleging that he induced doctors, nurses, and physicians' assistants to prescribe fentanyl, prescribe the Insys, Subsys spray, by having them participate in these fake speaker programs, right? Like they'd arrange speaker fees from like $1,000 to several $1,000s to go speak somewhere, when really they were getting the money for increasing their prescriptions of Subsys to the public. One of the healthcare providers earned $83,500 in kickbacks to prescribe Insys's fentanyl spray. Now, Perlman's pleaded not guilty. He's going to trial in November, right? But while he's under indictment, he's on bail, right? So he's out of jail on bail. And here's where the story gets delicious. Perlman had an accident and had to have surgery for his spine. After his spinal surgery, he was prescribed opioids. And then he got addicted to the opioids. And then to try to kick the opioids, he, in New Jersey, got himself a medical marijuana card and had a New Jersey doctor recommend to him that he could use medical marijuana. And he went before the judge that had bailed it, presided over his bail, and argued that he had a constitutional right to use medical marijuana while under this indictment, and that they could not stop him. They could not require drug tests. That was part of his bail conditions, that he has drug tests. He tried to get out of the piss testing for his bail that would detect medical marijuana that he's trying to use to kick opioids. And the judge said no.
Maybe we should start at 420, right? Marijuana reference.
So Jeffrey Perlman, sorry, man. Karma's a real bitch, huh? I may just overdose on irony. It's 4:20, folks. Let's take our union-mandated safety briefing, and we'll be right back with more marijuana news right after this.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Georgia.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is high-purity THC content marijuana, and it's not a healthy substance.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Celebrity Marijuana Zone with Steve Bloom from celebstoner.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Pod 2.0.
It's not your father's Woodstock weed.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, folks, we're talking about Jeffrey Perlman, the Insys Therapeutics pharmaceutical executive, who's on bail on charges of bribing doctors to overprescribe opiates that people get addicted to. He ended up getting addicted to an opiate, and then to kick that opiate, got on medical marijuana, and then asked the judge to not piss test him while he's on bail for kickbacks to overprescribe opiates so that he can use medical marijuana to deal with his reliance on opiates. It's an O. Henry play, I'm telling you. It's Shakespearean in the levels of tragedy. And when you get into the story here, it's funny how he tried to argue this. According to the New York Daily News, the lawyers for Perlman argued that if he had to give up medical marijuana, that would force him to return to using opioids, impairing his constitutional rights to fully participate in his defense and to due process. You follow that? The guy who worked for the opiate company, who's under indictment for forcing the overprescription of opiates to which people become addicted, is saying that if he has to go back to opiates, it would so devastate him that he'd be unable to participate in his legal defense. I guess they were fine for everyone else, but not this guy. So the judge, this is a U.S. Magistrate Judge Sarah Merriam in New Haven, Connecticut, said that it was a faulty assumption that Perlman would have to go back to opiates when there are other treatment options. She says, quote, she wrote in the decision, "Other reasonable treatments exist. Indeed, in states with no medical marijuana law or more restrictive laws, patients with the defendant's condition must use other forms of treatment." So a little bit more icing on this cake here. The guy who is under indictment for getting doctors to overprescribe opiates wants to have the choice to use medical marijuana instead, But his company went and donated $500,000 to prevent recreational marijuana in Arizona, which would have given a lot of people the choice to use marijuana instead. And now he's being denied his choice because there's other forms of drugs available. The same damn argument the anti-medical marijuana people use on us when they say, well, you don't need to use medical marijuana for your glaucoma. They got eye drops. You don't need to use medical marijuana for your pain. They got opioids. You don't need to use medical marijuana for your seizures. We got other stuff. Boy, how does that feel, not getting the first choice of medicine you'd like to use, Jeffrey Perlman? She also the judge also points out that defendants who are out on bail are also required not to violate federal law, and that possession of marijuana, even if legal under state law, remains illegal under federal law. Well, it's illegal under Connecticut law. It's illegal under New Jersey law. And thanks to a $500,000 donation from Jeffrey Perlman's former company, it's illegal in Arizona too. So, I love this story. I can't believe how much irony is loaded in this one story. I'm going to send that out in the chat room, give you a chance to check that out. Some folks in the chat room saying we're having some difficulty with our stream connection. Sorry about that. It's not me. I don't know what's going on, but it says we're connected right now, so we'll just keep going with it. Let me get to another story after the INSIS story. And that is back to our opponents out at Smart Approaches to Marijuana, Project SAM. So the Drug Policy Alliance has released a report today. And this one is, I'm looking for the title of it, the official title. It's called, It's Time for the U.S. to Decriminalize Drug Use and Possession. And in this case, they're talking about all drugs, not just weed. Decriminalize all drugs. And I would go farther. I would legalize all drugs, but we'll start with decriminalize. And let's make sure we understand what our terms mean. Decriminalize in this sense means it's still illegal. You still can't go somewhere to buy it. It's still illegal to sell it. It's still illegal to manufacture it. It's still illegal to grow it. It's still illegal to process it, extract it, concentrate it, cook it, anything. But if we catch you with some on you, and you're not trying to sell it, we'll just fine you. Maybe give you some sort of probation, maybe give you some sort of mandated community service, maybe give you some sort of mandated rehab, but we won't put you in jail. This is like literally the least we could do, right? Just not jail people who use drugs. And for me, it's a simple concept. Like, it boggles my mind that we have people who consider themselves to be Americans, who consider themselves to be all wrapped up in the flag and liberty and justice and truth and the land of the free and the home of the brave. But they can put all that aside if we're talking about drugs. Their concept of liberty and freedom and, individual responsibilities is pretty consistent when they're talking about guns, businesses, driving race cars and going off-road on four-wheelers and riding motorbikes and jumping out of planes. Pretty consistent on the freedom angle there. But as soon as you introduce drugs into the topic, they become these central planning socialist communist dictators. We can't let people just choose to use weed and heroin and cocaine. Why? They'll do terrible things and society will crumble. Well, no, it won't. The first thing that people need to understand whenever we have these discussions is that you don't know most of the people who use drugs. You don't know most of the heroin users. You don't know most of the cocaine users. You don't know most of the meth users, most of the potheads, any label you want to throw out there. You don't know most of them because they don't get busted. They don't have overdoses. They don't cause mayhem. They don't rob people. And these people I'm talking about are the vast majority of the people who use drugs. You know, they'll say that, well, 30% of the people who try heroin go on to have a dependence problem. Okay, so 70% of the people who use heroin don't. And those numbers get bigger for every other drug. So something like 88% of the people, or my math, 78% of the people who use cocaine don't have a problem with it. 85% of the people who use alcohol don't have a problem with it. 91% of the people who use marijuana don't have a problem with it. Really, the only problem they have with it is finding it and keeping it secret. Those are the only problems most people have with their drugs. I have a drug problem. I can't find any. I have a drug problem. I can't afford any, right? Most people get along with their drugs just fine. And what has happened for most people, for the guys like Stam, he's the perfect example of this, right? DEA guys, cops, these are the guys who, by the nature of their profession, are going to interface with the smallest sliver minority of the worst end of the drug user spectrum. This would be like asking a Lyft driver who only works when the bars close what he thinks of Lyft passengers. Bunch of rowdy, loud drunks puking in the back of my car. Yeah, if you only worked at bar closing time, you would think Lyft passengers were awful. It's like the emergency room doctor, right? The emergency room doctor, ask him what he thinks about motorcycles. Ask the emergency room doctor what he thinks about motorcycles. He's like, oh my God, they're awful. They're terrible. Every day I got someone coming in off a motorcycle wreck. Their bodies are all mangled. They're just destroyed. It's just terrible. They have skin grafts they have to go through. It's awful. Motorcycles ought to be banned. Well, yeah, because the only motorcycle riders he ever runs into are the ones that end up wrecking. Because he's the ER doc. The same thing for the cop or for the rehab doctor. These Project Sam people, most of them are rehab industry people. So yeah, if you're getting that 10%, that 5%, that whatever percent of the worst who do have serious issues, I can see why you'd think letting people use drugs is going to cause mayhem in society. But really, what we have to separate is what is the mayhem we're getting from the drug use versus what is the mayhem we're getting from the drug prohibition. Now look, I'm not a Pollyanna on this. I've used just about every drug that's out there, and I've known a lot of people who've used more. I've been in some really, really bad situations with regard to drugs, and I've been in some really great situations with regard to drugs. And what I can tell you from my experience is that there are some people who are scary drug people. I've known them. I've been in rooms with Mexican mafia and piles of cash and people with, I don't know if they're AK-47s, but similar weapons. I've been in those rooms. I've been in cars with speed freaks doing 130 miles an hour down the freeway while doing lines off the center console. I've seen the shit. So I know there can be bad dudes. There can be bad people with bad experiences on drugs. But in almost all of those cases I can think of, those people have far less influence, power, money, and ability to cause mayhem if the drugs are legal. Part of what gave them their power and their ability to flout the law and behave recklessly was the fact they had so much money and profit and time from not having to work so hard for that profit, right? A couple hours a day slinging, meth, and you can make plenty of money and then spend the rest of your time goofing off, right? The problems we have to separate out are how few people are there that when they do a drug, do it irresponsibly and then misbehave badly? Because that's a non-zero number. There are harms from drugs. I'm not going to say there aren't. But how small is that compared to 2.4 million people behind bars, compared to 4 times more likely for a black person to be arrested than a white person? How much mayhem is that compared to the bloodshed going on as the cartels in Mexico fight for the smuggling routes? I don't see Dos Equis and Corona shooting it up in Juarez over the ability to get their trucks across the border full of Corona and Dos Equis. You don't see Cuervo and Patron fighting it out. Really, those of us who use drugs, we just want to be treated like everyone else who uses the other drugs. We want to be treated like beer drinkers, like whiskey drinkers, like cigar smokers, like cigarette smokers, like people on Xanax, like anybody else. People using coffee. We'll go into more detail when we come back. Stick around.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Putting together the most comprehensive live weekday marijuana news talk program is a full-time job. Now you can do your part to ensure that listener-supported independent cannabis radio journalism can continue by becoming a patron of the Marijuana Agenda. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button. If you're an organization or business looking to promote your brand, we have sponsorship patronage available at mjagenda.com. Sponsorship includes 15 and 30-second ad breaks and 6-minute interviews on the podcast, depending on sponsorship level, which begins at $19.99 a month. Thank you for your support, and remember, I cannot do it without you. Please become a patron today at mjagenda.com.
Did you know that in the U.S., black women have the highest HIV infection rates of all women? As a public health professional, I know we can do better. Every day, I work to close the gap in health inequities, but I'm just one person. We need you to join us in this important fight. This October, we're coming to Atlanta for the 2017 Drug Policy Alliance Reform Conference. Join us in the fight to end the drug war. Register now at reformconference.org.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Veterans of Compassion with the Veterans Cannabis Group. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Hello, Mr. Man. Hi. I'm working. I'm sorry. No food till this is done. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
So we're talking about this new report from Drug Policy Alliance. It's time for the U.S. to decriminalize drug use and possession. They had a teleconference today at 1 Eastern. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to record it or hear much about it, but I'm reading the press release on this. And they say the idea of decriminalization means nobody gets arrested, goes to jail or prison, or faces criminal punishment simply for possessing a small amount of a drug for personal use. And we're finding this to be a very successful policy in Portugal. The administration of the laws there in Portugal have seen, decreases in HIV/AIDS, drug overdose rates, no significant increases in rates of crime or drug use. And this has been going on since 2001. And Project Sam and Kevin Sabet and the drug war prohibitionists, they always try to poo-poo Portugal. Oh, that doesn't apply. Portugal's not the same. And you can't really count Portugal. And it's been interesting because Portugal has been a big thorn in their side. Portugal is really tough for them. And really, the only arguments they have are dangerous arguments to make. If they start arguing that, Portugal's a smaller country with a different culture and a different population, and, they start to make some of those culture arguments, right? Which is really code for, Portugal doesn't have a problem with black people, right? That's what that's code for. Whenever you hear that, you can't compare legalization, and you can't compare the pot shops in the Netherlands to the United States because they have a different culture. It's code. That's code for they don't have urban populations, which itself is code for they don't have a problem with black people. So, this this Portugal thing, if they don't go toward the racist cultural arguments, then they're stuck, because everything Portugal has done, they haven't started a big marijuana. They don't have any commercial drug use. There's no cocaine stores and heroin shops and cannabis cafes in Portugal. It's just decriminalized. You can just have your own personal amount. The illegal market still supplies it. Some would argue that the problem with decriminalization is that it subsidizes and it protects the demand side of the illicit market. This is why my only problem with decriminalization is it not going far enough. You're protecting the user, you're protecting the demand, but you're still criminalizing the supply. And all that does is provide for a greater customer base for that supplier. Because now you got customers who aren't afraid of getting busted. That's the only negative I've got from that. But in Portugal, it doesn't seem to have increased any drug use. Drug use in Portugal is right along where it is in the rest of Europe. It goes up, it goes down, but they didn't go crazy with drug use. And I think the reason this happens is because the prohibitionists don't understand that there's just a certain amount of demand for drugs. There's just always going to be a certain amount of demand for drugs. Now, you can increase that demand by allowing easier access to the supply, by reducing the consequences of access, by making it legal. But really, at some point, there's a point at where personal taste comes into this, right? There's just a point at where there's only going to be so many people that want to do that particular drug. Alcohol is perfectly legal. Anyone over 21 can get alcohol, and it's ubiquitous. You can get it damn near anywhere. But the rates of alcohol drinking have declined. They've gone way down in the past 30 years. We didn't make it illegal. Cultural tastes shifted. People's choice in wanting to use that drug shifted. But it's gone nothing but down. When I was a high school senior in 1985, the statistics said that my classmates, fellow high school seniors, 90% of us had tried alcohol, 70% of us had tried cigarettes, and 60% of us had tried marijuana. That's when I was a high school senior. Today's high school seniors, they're down to below 70% on whether or not they've ever drank. They're below 40% or around 40% on whether they've ever tried pot. And their cigarette use is down below a third. We got more kids now that smoke pot than smoke cigarettes, which is a good thing, by the way. So we didn't make those drugs any more illegal. Well, we did in a sense. We made alcohol illegal for 19 and 20-year-olds. When I was in 1985, when I was 19, or 17, I should say, the drinking age was still 19. So maybe that had something to do with it. Raise the drinking age a bit. With cigarettes, we put the cigarettes behind the counters, locked them up. We had anti-smoking campaigns. We got the cigarettes out of the movies and TV, although they're starting to come back a bit. But those drugs use didn't increase. And even when alcohol had been tried by 90% of high school seniors, it still wasn't 100%. And the regular use of alcohol is about 60%, 2/3, somewhere in that range among American adults now. Even though it's legal and anybody who wants to drink can, there's still about a third of the population that doesn't, even though that it's legal. So one of the interesting aspects of this report coming out, and especially it highlighting Portugal and its, 2001 total decriminalization. Literally, you can have a personal amount of heroin in one hand and a personal amount of cocaine in the other hand, a joint in one pocket, some meth in the other pocket, some mushrooms in the back pocket, and a tab of acid in your wallet. And you're not going to jail. You're not getting arrested. They might haul you in front of some counselors. And that'll be about it. And that's been successful in every reasonable measure of drug policy. So, Drug Policy Alliance puts out this report, and it highlights Portugal. So, Project SAM, the Smart Approaches to Marijuana, has a statement out on Drug Policy Alliance report calling for the decriminalization of all drugs. And so they say, this is Kevin Sabet's quote, "We cannot incarcerate our way out of our nation's drug problem. But the legalization and decriminalization of heroin and meth, which is the goal of groups like DPA, are not serious alternatives to current drug policy." Well, what is the alternative to current drug policy, right? Heroin and meth are currently illegal. What is the alternative to something being illegal? What could the opposite of illegal be? He continues by saying, quote, "The overall goal of public policy in America should be to support smarter policies that discourage drug use and its consequences, not encourage them." See, and here we go, back to that total misunderstanding. As if helping people survive an overdose is encouraging people to start heroin. As if not arresting someone who's using heroin is somehow encouraging them to use heroin. No, you know what encourages someone to use heroin? A pharmaceutical executive who's bribing doctors to overprescribe fentanyl sprays to people. That encourages people to use heroin when their fentanyl spray runs out, their insurance runs out, their prescription runs out, and now they're addicted to opioids. That encourages drug use. Not giving people clean needles. Not making sure they don't die from an overdose. But he won't mention what the ideas are here. He says people with drug use disorders need treatment, and we need better interventions in our healthcare system to identify drug problems before they grow. Always be wary when you hear Project Sam talking about interventions. Interventions, right? It's just gonna be an intervention. What an intervention is when you want to go about living your life in a certain way, and someone blocks you from living your life in that certain way. That's an intervention. Policies that what do you say here? Identify. Interventions that identify drug problems before they grow. So what sort of surveys or surveillance do we need to be under to make sure that our drug use isn't becoming a problem? And who gets to decide that? Is it Project Sam and their army of drug rehab professionals? Can you kind of see how there might be an incentive if you are a drug rehab professional who runs a drug rehab clinic to having policies that require people to go to drug rehab clinics, either by becoming arrested for their use of that drug or through some sort of intervention. So what if we have these interventions that identify a drug use disorder that's beginning, and the person decides, yep, I've got a drug use disorder, I'm just going to keep doing it. Do we intervene again with cops? So these interventions are all nice thoughts, nice concepts here. But he goes on to say, it's a simple fact that no community in America would be healthier or safer with more people using meth, heroin, cocaine, or marijuana, and there are smarter drug policy alternatives that communities should consider instead. Already, illegal drug use and its consequences cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars a year in public health and safety costs. I'm sorry, what's the budget for the DEA again? What's the budget for the entire war on drugs again? $15 billion, wasn't it? But we're going to worry about a few $100 million in public health and safety costs, allegedly. He says, the truth is that this report is nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to further open a door for a new for-profit legal drug industry in the United States, the next big tobacco of our time. If DPA was serious about providing smarter alternatives to the so-called war on drugs approach to drug policy, they would support other proven evidence-based alternatives like drug courts, pretrial diversion programs, and probation reform, which reduce drug use while alleviating pressure on our criminal justice system. All right, well, DPA has put out a brilliant report on just how biased and messed up the drug court system is, where people are getting sentences in drug courts that, if they relapse, then subject them to greater penalties than if they'd had just taken a guilty plea in the first place. You set these people up to fail. Drug courts are a guarantee that drug users with the most serious problems will be back, and a guarantee that marijuana users who don't have a serious problem will inflate their statistics. See, you got to keep marijuana illegal enough so that when you catch someone with it, the judge in a drug court can sentence them to probation with piss tests and requirements to go to rehab. Because marijuana doesn't mess people enough up to want to do that on their own. 15% of the people that check into rehab are self-admitters when it comes to marijuana. Over half of them are sent there by the criminal justice system. So it makes sense for Project Sam to be against decriminalization. It takes away the threat that gets them their customers.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
As a formerly incarcerated person, I know firsthand all the ways that we are disenfranchised when we are run through the system. Every day I work to help people regain their rights and dignity, but the fight is far from over. We need you to join us in this important fight. This October, we're coming to Atlanta for the 2017 Drug Policy Alliance Reform Conference. Join us in the fight to end the drug war. Register now at reformconference.org.
The Marijuana Agenda. Like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Northwest Cannabis Chronicle from the Marijuana Business Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Tjena, jag heter David, PKA Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back. As we close up shop today, talking about Project Sam versus the Drug Policy Alliance. The latest, of course, DPA puts out this report today saying it's time for the U.S. to decriminalize all drug use. Everything. You got PCP, you got heroin, you got meth, you got coke, you got ludes, got acid, shrooms. Give me a call. No, if you got any of those things, under the DPA report, the idea is you should not be criminalized for what you do to yourself. And this is another area. Like, I get so tired of people that claim to be Americans who support the flag and freedom and liberty and justice for all, who throw that away when it's marijuana or drugs. That, oh, you have the freedom to do anything you want to do, but not that. So, as we wrap this up, I gave you DPA's point of view that, hey, look at Portugal. They decrimmed all drugs in Portugal in 2001. It hasn't slid into the sea. There's not looting and chaos going on 24/7. Their drug use rate stayed the same. Their crime rates stayed basically the same. Their heroin use rates went down because the use of the average age of the heroin user in Portugal has just risen and risen and risen, giving the idea that the older people with dependence on heroin are still using it, but no, we're not getting as many new initiates starting it. We're seeing 90% decrease in new HIV AIDS infections. We're seeing like 80% decreases in overdose deaths. So Portugal's been this amazing success of decriminalization. And then Project Sam comes out with their statement saying, this is awful, this is terrible, why would you want to encourage drug use? Even though these very same policies in Portugal have led to the same or less drug use. So there's no basis in saying that the policies of decriminalization are going to increase drug use. Hell, we've even seen the policy of legalization of marijuana not increasing the teen use of marijuana. But for these guys, it's just the use itself. It's not whether the use is causing harm. To them, use is harm. Using drugs is harm. It will cause harm. It is a harm, and it must be eliminated. So what's funny about this, and Tom Angel pointed this out in a tweet earlier today, is that back in 2014, in a tweet from Vienna, Austria, Kevin Sabet said, mainly because of Greg Greenwald's misrepresentation, people think Portugal has legalized. It hasn't. In fact, strategy seems close to learn about Sam. Strategy seems close to our strategy. So in 2014, Sabet was going off talking about how Portugal's decrim is kind of what they're looking for. Because Sabet, he always tries to play this, baby bear, Goldilocks, just right position. Oh, legalization is too soft, but prohibition is too hard. Decriminalization with forced P-tests and mandatory rehab, that's just right. So in referring to Portugal, he was referring to the fact, and I've seen him say this in other speeches. Like, I'm kind of a sabatologist here. And I've seen him talk about many times how us drug users, us drug people, we keep misrepresenting Portugal because Portugal has what Project Sam wants. It has interventions with public health experts who offer rehab. It's just what we want. So in 2014, he was praising Portugal as something that was a strategy close to learn about Sam. Now he's decrying the whole Portugal thing and saying that it's going to cause more use, more harms, and lead to the next big tobacco. Yeah, so there's your Kevin Sabet argument. Someone in the chat room is asking why I got to use a Southern accent. Did I use a Southern accent? I don't know. I didn't on purpose. Sometimes it just leaps out of me, I guess. But yeah, this Kevin Sabet bleating about decriminalization, it goes along with like what they're always saying that they're going to come out any day now. Any day now, we're going to get from Project Sam their policy recommendations for marijuana. They've been promising this for a long time, right? Because they keep saying, well, we don't believe in, that people's lives should be ruined just for smoking a joint. They shouldn't lose their jobs and have criminal records and be, blackballed for life. No, that shouldn't happen. I mean, we should reserve that for the people who sell and grow and process marijuana and transport marijuana. They should have their lives ruined. But no, not the people who are just smoking weed. We need them for customers. The people who are just smoking weed usually have jobs and insurance, and their insurance will pay, especially with Obamacare, will pay for this rehab treatment that we need. And if we get the marijuana people in rehab, they got jobs to go back to, and they got piss tests they don't want to fail, and the drug that they're using is not really addictive. It's not going to really cause them to be sick if they don't use it for most of them, so they can easily pass the P test, and the next thing you know, wow, what a success our drug courts are. Our drug courts are so good at turning around people with addiction when half the people there for addiction to marijuana were forced there just because they got caught with something. Oh man, that's all the time we got for today. Time flies when you legalize. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!